Hey everybody, this is John the Other, obviously, and the following is a reading of an article written by me called Affirmative Discontent. Affirmative consent is a social movement, but it is also an emerging new legal standard governing sexual liaisons between men and women. In what is now mainstream ideology, adults are not capable, apparently, of deciding for themselves to get naked and horizontal with each other's naughty bits. Incapable, that is, without repeated and ongoing mutual affirmations that, indeed, yes, please do slide my panties down, thank you for asking. This is the new affirmative consent standard which began with California's Senate Bill 967, the so-called yes means yes standard spreading now across the U.S. And it's a good thing, because without affirmative consent, every sexual encounter in history has been rape. Obviously. Adults over 18 years old are not now, and never have been, able to decide for themselves that they want to hump, especially women, because they're retarded or something. For real. May I unbutton the top button of your jeans? Yes? Thanks. Okay, I'm unbuttoning them now. May I unbutton the next button of your jeans? Yes? Okay, good. Thank you. I'm doing that now. And so on. Now, for the sake of argument, we will set aside the implied idea that women are so helpless and incompetent they cannot decide or communicate for themselves without a procedural manual. Of course, activities like taking out a loan, applying for a job, or driving a car are all acts of volition that women seem capable of enacting. They can even conduct such feats without repeated check-in or an infantilizing legal standard to prevent feminine pants pooping from the stress of self-ownership. We will also set aside the fact that in a legally conforming and affirmatively consenting sexual encounter, a man repeatedly asking for permission and a woman giving her repeated and ongoing permissions, well, such an encounter is a lobotomized and ham-fisted version of kinky BDSM fetish. Now, in the world of sexual fetish, it is bad, very bad etiquette, to forcibly rope non-kinksters into your particular type of play. Sex-positive feminists, now driving the adoption of affirmative consent laws, seem to have forgotten this minor point of sexual etiquette. And indeed, as affirmative consent laws are drafted, none of the sellers of affirmative consent are bothered that these laws provide no mechanism to establish in law that consent was given. So, incompetently, ham-fisted BDSM fetish play is being forced onto us under the color of law, and they haven't even given us a safe word. Now, avoiding further sexual metaphors, the icing on this ugly cake is that proponents of the yes means yes legal standard have repeatedly claimed that a woman who chooses to engage in sex, then later regrets her choice, is a rape victim. Yes, that's right. A woman who actively and aggressively pursues sex and then changes her mind post facto is a victim of rape. The guy who pedantically sought repeated permission and got the legally required yes, yes, yes at every step is a rapist, because days later she realized that all the explicit details of her personal princess fantasy were not exactly fulfilled, or she thought of something else that she didn't think of last night when she was humping. Yes, 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 that's a talking point from the so-called sexual positive affirmative consent lobby, and no, 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 I'm not making any of this up. The affirmative consent phenomenon, of course, is a relatively new element of the feminist movement. Legal enforcement of this ideology is, as yet, only a handful of years old, but under the affirmative consent model, any sexual, or even social encounter without affirmative consent is legally rape, and the accused guilty in law as soon as the word rape is spoken. It is the burden of the accused to provide evidence that consent was repeatedly obtained, despite no mechanism existing yet in the text of any such law to provide such evidence. So it turns out the craziest of the feminists were right all along. All sex is rape, at least so long as somebody says it was afterwards, and I think we can count on them for that. Now, critics of affirmative consent proposed way back in 2012 that a legal non-rape sexy fun time would require parties to co-sign a legal sexual consent form. Of course, the response at the time from yes means yes advocates was that such agreements would be legal rape contracts. At the time, the non-feminist world left that argument alone, believing the legal standard's internal illogic had detonated, ending a very bad idea. We were wrong. Glaring internal contradictions appear no hindrance to legal adoption of radical feminist ideology. Indeed, after several U.S. states have added affirmative consent to their laws, affirmative consent activists have begun distributing the very same consent forms previously proposed as a parody of the idea. A Yes Means Yes advocacy group, the Affirmative Consent Project, is instructing college students to take a selfie with a signed contract before they have sex with each other just to make sure both parties are consenting. In fact, the group has been distributing contracts, along with condoms and lube, to schools nationwide as part of a consent conscious kit, according to the Washington Examiner. I'll put a link to that in the description bar. It's apparently only a rape contract if it is first proposed by a non-feminist. And obviously interrupting the dynamic of an evening headed rapidly towards the bedroom with a request for paperwork is about as buzzkill as it can get. So a man who seeks safety from a baloney rape accusation based in subjective post-facto regret is not going to have much of a sex life. And you are expected to keep having sex, of course. Girls, for all their prized plausible deniability, still want to screw as well. And that means you're not intended to ask anyone to sign anything, at least not a mood-killing "we agreed to have sex" form. But that doesn't mean a signed declaration is not useful in another way. A legal agreement to have sex is arguably more useful when its signature is rejected by a prospective sexual partner than if such a woman were to sign on the dotted line. After all, postcoital revocation of consent is a political talking point in current Yes Means Yes rhetoric. A woman who agrees to sex, has sex, and then later regrets that sex is claimed by the feminists driving legal changes that post-facto regret amounts to revocation, and thus a consensual encounter becomes rape in law. Does anybody think a signed agreement to hump will be upheld as defense against a sex assault charge in the college kangaroo courts where the current version of these laws hold sway? Barbar, please put your hand down. But long before any man and woman find their way to a pants-off sexy time adventure, a legal contract becomes useful before a man even suggests going for coffee in an elevator with his prospective romantic interest. Such a contract may not be enforceable in law, as indeed it will be merely a declaration of adulthood and self-ownership. I, the undersigned, declare by my signature that I am an adult acting with all the self-possession, agency, and volition of a fully realized person. In contrast, I state clearly and forcefully that I am not an object, lacking volition or will, or acted upon without my own agency or intent. I further hereby assert my personal responsibility for my own choices and those choices' outcomes. I also express by my signature that I do now and may in future enjoy the company of John Hembling. That would be me. In the contract, it would be a line that you fill in. Enjoy the company of John Hembling, including potentially private and adult social intercourse, and any incidents of note may also be documented and signed in agreement by myself. Name, date of birth, driver's license, the date of signature, the signature of the person, and the counter-signature of those other people present, like yourself. Of course, when sitting down in a coffee shop for a first meet-and-greet date with a woman you have not even sexual but only social interest in, she may reject your request that she sign such a declaration.
Are you crazy? Are you mentally ill? I'm not signing that shit. What do you want?
She may even make a public scene, excoriating you as some kind of weirdo.
I, the undersigned, declared by my signature that I'm an adult acting with a... What is this? I'm not signing a disclosure agreement. That's bullshit. What are you doing? Fuck off!
She may take to social media, bringing her friends in as reinforcement to accuse you of having all manner of cooties. How dare you ask her to affirm that she's a self-possessed adult? How dare you? And in such rejection, whether it is loud in public or whether it is polite, you have avoided the company of an abusive person, a woman who refuses, publicly, her own adult agency. Her own responsibility is a woman who wants to retain her power to attack you legally and socially by claiming the constructed social power of imaginary victimhood. But in that rejection, She does not get to join you for coffee or lunch or get a ride from you to the mall. She doesn't get to enter your home after rejecting signature on her own adult agency. And you won't let her join you for lunch without your ridiculous and invasive form filling and signature. Obviously, you're not just a social reject, you're a cowardly sissy who's afraid of girls, right? Let her call you a creep. But don't forget to write down the date and the time and the location of her rejection along with her name. Publish it on your website if you have one. Tweet it. Facebook it. She's not being shamed. She's simply being noted to your social media contacts as a woman that you had interest in, but who rejected your request to formally declare her own self-ownership and adulthood. You're just being responsible. Gentlemen and ladies, we are now living in an insane age of reversed burden of legal proof. In the history of Western law, the burden of evidence has always been on the accuser. A person accused of wrongdoing has, until now, always had a legal presumption of innocence, and the requirement to support an accusation was on the accuser. This has changed, and it continues to change. The burden of proof of no wrongdoing is now, and increasingly, on the accused, thanks mostly to feminist changes to law. This means that you, a man, are guilty. That's your starting position. And this is what feminists want. It's also what women who are passive and silent as feminists rewrite the laws also want. This obviously changes the social dynamic between men and women, but weak and fearful men will denounce and insult those with a stronger sense of their own worth, or who assert their own value by rejecting the passively implied threat through feminine denial of self-agency. And those first few men who are the early adopters of required female declared adulthood will be publicly vilified, mocked, and excoriated. I will be among them. Men who follow such early adopters will have an easier time. And those men who still later continue to pursue the company of women without some sort of declared female self-ownership will be seen correctly as conformists and martyrs, legally prostrating themselves out of fear of female revocation of their good man status. And I understand the fear of being singular among men in demanding women formally declare adult agency and non-victimhood before allowing them into your personal space or private life. The attacks on your person and your identity, and even the fear of such attacks, are not trivial fears. I also realize that the details of such a declaration as outlined here in this discussion are clumsy and incomplete and will certainly have to evolve. So, having said all that, I'll go first. You can thank me later. So one of the thoughts that has occurred to me is that women, for all of their prized plausible deniability, are the ones who are in charge of, do you retain the power to destroy a guy through just empty accusation in this culture of extreme suspicion and tribunals? Or as a woman, are you trying to do something to take the gun off the table? And if that's the case, then I have put a link to a PDF version of this form in the description bar of this video. Print it off, fold it up, put it in your purse, and whip it out and sign it the next time you have coffee with that cute guy in your class. Thanks very much for listening, and have a lovely day.